Buy anywhere but Parsons Ford in Martinsburg. We became number one by making you number one first. Parsons.
From the Talk Radio WRNR studios, it's time for Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob Mario and David Welch.
Thank you, Cliff, and welcome into Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave. Matt in for Rob. Rob on his final day of vacation today. We hope that he has had a great time, and good timing for Rob, it sounds like to me, Matt, because I think this is our last beautiful day for a while.
A little rain in the forecast.
A little rain. It's like 9 days in a row rain, it seems like to me.
I don't think it's going to be like straight rain. So
well, there's a possibility that it could be a lot of rain over the next few days. So I'm depressed today because I like sunny weekends myself, but doesn't look like we're going to get very much of that. Our sponsors on today's program, Miller Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram on Route 9 east of Martinsburg, home of the Lifetime Powertrain Guarantee, and Farmers and Mechanics Insurance Companies. When it comes to your home, auto, farm, or business, we are trusted, reliable, and experienced. Our phone number, 304-263-3540 and 263-6586. We welcome you to call in at any time during the program. Of course, this is our Friday morning political crew day where we'll be talking all politics after 8:30. But before we get to that point, and by the way, Siobhan Hunter, our intern, I just want to mention we're going to talk about that question of the day that we put up yesterday, which is what car did you take your driver's test in?
Yes.
And we got, 1,500 views on that or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's 1,700 now.
1,700 views on that. So lots of people wanted to tell us what car they took their driver's test in. I took mine in my dad's 67 Mustang with a 390 engine in it. It was 2 years old at the time I took the test. But I do remember it was about the fastest car in Southern California at the time when I took it. And the instructor got in the car with me and said, "Easy, son." So that was my memory of my driver's test. I think I passed it. You can listen to the program on 740 AM, 106.5 FM, cable channel 10. We're streaming on Talk Radio WRNR, or you can download our app on WRNR Talk Radio. Our producer today, as always, is Sherry Dieter Davis. Special guest in this morning, Matt. I'd like to welcome in right off the bat the Secretary of State for the state of West Virginia, the Honorable Mac Warner. Mac, welcome into the program.
Hey, thank you for having me here. It's always great to be out here in the Panhandle.
And it's always nice, too, because oftentimes we get the statewide officials by telephone, so it's great to have you in studio and get to talk to you personally. Let me ask you the most important question, which is, what car did you take your first driver's test in?
I had a Dodge Charger, so that was the car.
You did yours in a muscle car, too?
I did, yes.
And was that your dad's car, or was that something
that was my car in high school?
The reason we had this question come up yesterday, we had a guy by the name of Dan Rousey on, who's a car connoisseur from Charlestown and has great stories about cars. But one of the stories he got to tell yesterday, that many years ago, he was one of the participants in the cannonball race. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not, but the one that goes from New York City to Los Angeles. And he and his partner did it in a Porsche 911S in 38 hours. Can you imagine going coast to coast in 38 hours? Also, welcome in Daryl Scholl, who works for the Secretary of State, and I don't know exactly what your title is, Daryl, but you're the Secretary of State's guy here in the Eastern Panhandle.
I'm his field representative for the 11 eastern counties.
11 counties, huh? Mm-hmm. Very nice. And co-hosting with me today, back from a 4-week layoff on the show, Mike Caryl, former tax commissioner and all things that are Republican. Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Where were you for the last 4 weeks?
I was at Martinsburg for half of those. But,
okay.
But
that's a great place to take a vacation, I understand.
Yeah, staycation. My wife and I were in Scotland and Norway on a cruise, a Viking cruise.
Oh, nice. Those ones that go through the river?
No. This is a sea cruise.
In
fact, that was the name of the ship, the Viking Sea. But we flew into London, of course, and then that's where the ship was docked, and we got on and made stops and land tours on the Orkney Islands and the Shetland Islands.
Oh, beautiful.
And then crossed the North Sea to the coast of Norway and went up some of the big fjords, as you know, that you can way up. And we finished in Bergen and then had to fly back through Copenhagen, but the big trip crossed the pond from there. But
And you kids behaved yourself, right?
Well, yes, of course we behaved ourselves.
Okay.
We're mature adults, and she's a very experienced traveler. That was my first real cruise at sea. We went through the Panama Canal, but that doesn't count. And,
okay.
And couldn't have been more impressed. It was an interesting experience, the rocking in the boat a little bit. But
See, I'll never go on a cruise because I always think they're going to tip over and the bathrooms are going to go out and we're going to be stranded out at sea.
well, that's actually
I have a phobe about that.
nearly that bad a thing has happened in the past, but I couldn't be more complimentary of the quality of the ship and the staff. The crew was awesome.
Mr. Secretary, let's get right into some issues because you are the state's chief election officer.
Yes.
And these days, that's gotten probably more attention than you'd like to admit because of the Russian meddling and what have you. This week in Finland, the president has a joint press conference with the president of Russia, and it became quite controversial, and it brought to light again Russian meddling. The president seems to think that it's not the kind of meddling that the intelligence officers and experts are saying in this country. What are your thoughts generally? Has there been Russian meddling or attempts to meddle in our elections? And does that impact or affect the state of West Virginia in any way, shape, or form?
Well, you've got a couple great questions in one there. There has been Russian meddling and probably others as well. But to the degree that it influenced the election, that is really an examination of the social media, the impact of social media in our elections. There are a number of people trying to influence people through social media. What we were not ready for in the 2016 election was the extent of the Russian meddling to where they actually sent operatives inside the United States with $1 million a month budgets to actually impact the influence or to influence our elections. We've caught up with that since that time. We're now pushing that throughout all the states to make sure that we are prepared for the 2018 election. And in fact, on Monday, we're having all of our county clerks come to Morgantown for a cybersecurity conference for this very purpose, is to prepare, make sure West Virginia is stood up in preparation for this election.
I think we could all admit that when voters, at the point in time where voters don't have confidence in the security and fairness of the election process, in some ways we would all be in trouble because that's just so fundamental to the process, protecting that security. When you say that we had Russian people coming in and meddling in the elections, I don't remember there being any evidence really in 2016 of them actually meddling in the actual vote count. Weren't they influencing opinions through their use of social media platforms mostly?
That's exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up. No votes were changed anywhere in the United States that anyone's aware of. None of the 50 states have found any evidence of a vote being changed. And I like to talk about checkers and chess. The United States was looking at playing checkers. We were worried about the Russians trying to get into one machine and change a vote, that sort of thing. There were hackathons out in Las Vegas where people, these computer hackers would say, if I had 28 minutes, with unfettered access to a machine, I could change it and manipulate it and so forth. Well, no Secretary of State has machines where they have a hacker has unfettered access to them. We secure them, and right prior to the election, we check them out for that sort of thing, and then the voting takes place. So none of that occurred, but the chess that the Russians were playing was this actually three-dimensional chess where they were affecting through social media they were attacking the fissures in American society, black against white, Catholic against Christian versus Muslim, all the sorts of things that we've seen in Missouri and Charlottesville and that sort of thing. So the Russians would use social media. They would hack somebody's account, and it would look like it was coming from, say, your daughter's account to her friends that would say, let's all go support Hillary. and let's go to Main Street, Miami at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then they hack somebody else's, my son's account, and send out all the Trump supporters that my son has, on his account. And they'd say, let's go support Trump at 2 o'clock on Main Street in Miami. So they would get these two factions going at one another at the same place and same time. And everybody thought that it was legitimate Hillary supporters and Trump supporters when it was really Russian military operatives. It was being run out of St. Petersburg, Russia. And so that's the sort of scary thing that came to light after the election. Now, there's some indication that the Obama administration knew about some of this before the election and did very little, if anything, about it because they were concerned how this would be taken. We didn't understand all the nuances of this. But in the 2 years since that election, a lot of this has come to light. It's now been presented to us both in classified and unclassified versions. And that's what we have to be ready for, and we need to reassure the American public that we as elections officials are on top of this, preparing for it, and are staying one step ahead. It's a race that has no finish. We always have to stay one step ahead of the hackers and the people trying to influence our elections.
But when the President of the United States gets up and essentially says that I believe President Putin when he says that there has been no meddling. Mike's shaking his head no. Do I have that framed incorrectly? But when
yes, he didn't say that at all.
What did he say, Mike?
He didn't give as forceful an assertion that there was a Russian attempt. He simply said this man has given a strong response. He didn't say he necessarily believed him, but he implied that maybe there was some, that it was ambiguous, and it isn't ambiguous, as the Secretary has pointed out, and we all know. And the problem with President Trump on this issue is that he's so thin-skinned, for good reason, because of what the mass media all they talk about is Russian collusion, that he can't separate the collusion with his campaign allegation, which is, there's no evidence of that, certainly at his level. He told Comey, if there's people in my campaign that were messed around, and then one of those first conversations that go get them. But he can't distinguish that charge from the actual Russian effort, which the Secretary has described and knows well. Let's
hold that. We'll save that for the next section. I'm sure you'll get some pushback from the two Democrats that might be at the table, but that's what that show and that segment is all about. Mr. Secretary, in Maryland a couple of weeks ago, there was a report. If I understand this report correctly, it was that there was some Russian operatives working for the computer company that the state of Maryland had hired to do the software and to manage the voter software program in the state of Maryland. Do you know anything about that situation, and did that raise, raise a red flag with you that same thing could happen in any state?
Yes, and there's where I'm talking about the three-dimensional chess. That's a second dimension, and that's the vendors. So if you think of concentric circles, when you think of the voting in a precinct on election day, you're at that center target. That's the key point. And then you have the registration process, and that's a lot of what the Russian influence was going towards, was influencing voter databases, registration databases. Then you get to the next circle, and you're talking vendors that provide the software and so forth, and even the hardware that we use for all that process. And so what this has brought to our attention, and what we have the three-lettered agencies working for, is to determine where that influence has penetrated all three of those circles. And so the vendor circles is something that we were not as perhaps tuned into as we could have been, and that has brought to light. In fact, as soon as I heard that, I got to my elections officials and said, get with our local FBI and have them start checking out, make sure that our vendors haven't had any of that sort of Russian influence or other outside influence. And I think secretaries of state all across the United States are going through that same process. I'm a lawyer, and we deal in cases and controversies, and so this is a case and controversy. There was a situation that happened here. We need to take that precedent and now apply it to make sure all 50 states are secure against that particular type of controversy. And so that's what the role of DHS is now. What's key is right before the Obama administration,
Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, right. Before they left office, Jay Johnson, the director of Homeland Security at the time, designated elections as critical infrastructure. And what that did is it put elections on the same level as nuclear power plants, our electrical grid, water, transportation, chemical, Wall Street. All of those are critical infrastructure sections of the American government and economy. And so now elections are being treated on the same level of importance as all of those sectors. So we have been working with a government coordinating council to draw the plan out that says, here's what that means. Now, I can tell you there were a lot of conservative secretaries of state who were concerned about the federal government taking over elections. So there's been some pushback. It hasn't been an easy sailing over the last 2 years. But we're working through all that, and each time we get together every 6 months for a National Association of Secretaries of State's meetings, and I just went to one last weekend in Philadelphia, and we're getting better in our communications with the Department of Homeland Security to secure elections.
Well, because so you're telling us then, and it's comforting actually, that you're telling us that at least in West Virginia, that you are a step ahead of any kind of attempts to meddle or to interfere with the elections, and that really as a voter in West Virginia, I shouldn't have anything to worry about.
I wouldn't say you don't have anything to worry about.
Well, if I have to worry about something, what should I be worrying about?
Everybody needs to be careful about their computer connections. 90% of the hacking that the Russians are doing are coming through phishing exercises where they send you a link and it makes it look like it's coming from an official AOL account or your bank account or Amazon. And then it says, to update get the latest software, click on this link. That's a phishing link. And when you click on it, now they have access inside your computer. And if you've ever hooked your phone up to charge to your computer, now they've got access through your phone. And when you then plug that in at your office, now they've clicked into your office computer. Every American has to be concerned about watching for phishing expeditions, because that's where they will go through the path of least resistance, and that is through phishing links on all of our computers, phones, and so forth. So
Mike, you need to listen carefully because you have a new blog, and you don't want them hacking into that new blog you use.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if they did, but that's why I have a webmaster as a millennial.
Yeah, that's the problem. Only people under 30 would understand this anyway.
But I trust.
Savon would probably understand.
I trust. But Mr. Secretary, obviously technology has enabled this type of practice. And that's why the responses and the care that you describe is important. But I've observed voting irregularities, shall we say, to be polite, for over a half century in this state. In fact, it's really when I decided which party to sign up with that was a key consideration for me back. You can imagine how long ago that was. But there were stories about. Southern West Virginia, that they had voting machines. Now these were mechanical machines, not the electronic, touchscreen deal. And the story was that they'd have so-called poll workers sitting, and they'd take the backs off of them, so that the a person behind the machine could see which way the vote went, and if they voted the right way, give the signal, and then the party member outside would hand the guy the half pint for his vote. I mean, and there's an old.
See, they were way more advanced than the Russians, weren't they?
Oh yeah, but Southern West Virginia, again, they were mechanical. They would laugh at them today, but there's an old joke about I want to when I die, I want to be either in West Virginia or Louisiana so that I can stay involved in politics.
Well, you can put Illinois in that too.
But there's still, because even though the Russian hacking, is not one that the Trump administration has been, real, one to talk about, emphasize. But when the new administration came in, they formed a commission to follow up on their all this voter fraud allegations they had about, and whatever happened to that, because it kind of fizzled, as I understand it.
What happened was that...
I have 3 minutes left, and I want to get one other question on another topic, too, before we get out of here. So.
Okay. Well, the president had made this assertion that there was massive voter fraud, and when he heard back from 50 secretaries of state saying, what in my state, I think that diffused that situation. But your point is that the voter fraud does occur We've had 2 convictions here in the state of West Virginia since I took over for voter fraud, and others being investigated, one here in the Panhandle. So we have changed the way we're doing investigations here in West Virginia. I want the people to understand that, and I would encourage at this point for anybody who sees something, say something. If you feel your vote's been bought, if you've been intimidated, if you feel there are irregularities at the polling system, say something. We'll put an investigator on it. We can discuss that later if you want.
Before we get out of here, Mr. Secretary, I have to ask you about the Don Blankenship situation. Apparently he's got enough signatures to get on the ballot, but there's a little snag. Can you frame that up for us?
I can discuss the process. This is probably going to
That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in you commenting or editorializing just the process here for Don Blankenship.
Well, he's chosen the Constitution Party, and it hasn't been, that's not one of the recognized parties in the state of West Virginia for the appearing on the official ballot. So he has to go through this petition process that you indicated. And so we will be looking at the signatures, if they're, how many are legitimate and so forth. That's the process that we go through. And the legislature has spoken with its sour grapes law. There's a question as to whether that applies or not.
Which means that if you lose a primary, you can't run in a general. Is that basically what that says?
That's correct. And so the legislature had passed this. It took effect. There's a new law that took effect June 5th. And whether he started the process before or after when it applies, it's really into the legal arena. Usually the Attorney General would represent the state of West Virginia on this, but since Patrick Morrissey is in that race, there's a conflict of interest. So outside counsel has been hired, and that's where I would refer.
Who selected that outside counsel?
It was probably a combination between my office, Secretary of State's office, and the Attorney General's office. And that's Mark Williams.
And do these attorneys have Republican ties? Do they have an incentive to make sure that Blankenship isn't on? Do you have full confidence in the firm that was hired?
I have utmost confidence in it. Not that I either asked or cared on the political party, but I think that this lawyer's brother is the mayor, Democrat mayor in Huntington. So
the politics is just so ripe with politics. Obviously, the Morrissey people don't want Blankenship on the ballot because he's going to take votes away from him, and so that's why that question gets asked. I'm sure that the Manchin people pray every day that Blankenship will be on the ball, which is one of the great ironies in West Virginia politics, I would imagine.
The importance is that the West Virginia Code is followed, and that's my job.
Real quick, Mike, if you have a comment.
Who has standing to be involved in any litigation that comes out of this?
In what regard? You talking candidates, or you talking people?
Your office will make a ruling, and then it'll probably be litigated, or can it be litigated?
Yes, I'm sure it will be from the Blankenship.
I'm going to have to let that answer be for the next time. We're going to take a short break. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. It was great to be enlightened with new information that we didn't have before. We're going to come back after the break with Mike, Joe, and Jason, and we're going to talk politics. Stay with us.
Thank you.
The death toll is now up to 13, some of them children, in last night's duck boat capsizing in Branson, Missouri. Police say they pulled 2 more bodies from Table Lock Lake this morning. They're looking for 4 others. KOLR-TV's Daniel Shedd says the tourist boat flipped and sank during a powerful storm.
50-mile-per-hour winds caused waves that would eventually capsize a Ride the Ducks vessel on Table Rock Lake. Trent Baer and his girlfriend witnessed the event aboard the showboat Branson Belle and pulled one of the victims out of the water. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. I'm requiring all passengers, please exit the vessel. We finally pulled her back up there, and a gentleman, I believe he was an EMT, started CPR.
Police say the victims range in age from 1 to 70. 7 people were injured, 2 of them critically. CBS News Update. I'm Deborah Rodriguez.
Now your local news from Talk Radio WRNR. According to U.S. Attorney Bill Powell, 37-year-old Bradley Bowers of Martinsburg has admitted to a firearms charge. He pled guilty to 1 count of possession of an unregistered firearm, admitting to having an unregistered 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun in May of last year in Berkeley County. Bowers faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and the Martinsburg Police Department investigated the case. Healthy Berkeley and the Martinsburg Farmers Market are sponsoring a walking program. Walk with a Doc is for everyone interested in taking steps for a healthier lifestyle and, at the same time, having the chance to have questions answered by local physicians. There's one today at 4:30 in the square in downtown Martinsburg. According to the Jefferson County Chamber of Commerce, the 2018 New Teacher Welcome Lunch will be held on Tuesday, August the 7th from noon to 1:30 at the Clarion of Harpers Ferry. I'm Adam Boardman, Talk Radio WRNR News.
Now, with your local forecast, weatherman Bob Kukin.
The Friday morning weather maps showing the high pressure system that's been keeping things dry and sunny for us, moving off to the east, off the coast now, and off to our west. It's a broad area of low pressure that's going to bring quite a bit of shower activity here to us for the next 4 or 5 days once we get into the weekend. Today itself, sunny and nice. The highs in the middle 80s. The winds light southeasterly. Clouds thicken up overnight with lows in the mid-60s. And then already by tomorrow, the chance for some afternoon showers developing, maybe a thunder shower too, with a high near 80. And expect some rain on Sunday throughout the day with a high near 80. I'm Bob Kukin, Talk Radio WRNR.
WVU Medicine welcomes Dr. Sarika Bagri to the staff at WVU Medicine Primary Care Inwood. Dr. Bagri is board certified in internal medicine and is now accepting new patients at Primary Care Inwood, conveniently located at 5047 Gerrardstown Road, Suite 2B in the Inwood Medical Building. For more information or to schedule an appointment with Dr. Bagri, call WVU Medicine Primary Care Inwood at 304-229-6343. 304-229-6343.
The 28th season of the Contemporary American Theater Festival returns to Shepherd University, July 6th through the 29th. A chance to see 6 bold new plays, including A Late Morning in America with Ronald Reagan. This world premiere from award-winning playwright Michael Weller takes us to a casual sit-down with the former president for recollections that only the First Lady might know. For a full schedule and more information, go to catf.org.
From the crack of the bat to the flash of the leather, Talk Radio WRNR's got your Nationals coverage all summer long.
Swinging a line drive, deep left field. Stevenson back, way back at the wall. Leaps and makes the catch. Bangs into the fence and holds on. That's the second out of the inning. 2 out here at the bottom of the ninth. A spectacular catch by Andrew Stevenson.
Listen live on AM 740 and FM 106.5. Talk Radio WRNR, the Panhandle Sports radio station.
Hi, honey.
Where are you?
I've been in line at the post office for the last 30 minutes.
Why are you at the post office? It'll take you all day.
Where else do I go to ship my packages or drop FedEx off at?
Honey, going postal is way faster, has less lines, and friendly service.
Where's going postal?
It's right in the Commons Shopping Center in Martinsburg. They'll ship your packages quickly, and you can avoid the lines.
Going postal should be your first choice for all your shipping needs. Going postal, the Commons, Martinsburg.
If you want to experience moments of joy, excitement, and satisfaction, visit the Honda Summer Spectacular event, where well-qualified buyers can get 1.9% APR on the 2018 Honda Accord, part of KBB.com's 2018 Best Overall Brand. You've just entered car buying bliss.
Miller Honda, south of Winchester, home of the lifetime powertrain warranty. www.mymillerhonda.com.
See dealer for financing details based on 2018 branded materials from Kelly Blue Book. Visit KBB.com for information.
Welcome back into the second part of the program. Nice to have you with us on this beautiful Friday morning. Friday, Matt, is Politics Day, and it's a day that we set aside for an hour and a half to talk about what we think are interesting topics going on. Current events, they would call those when I was back in school, right?
It's a shame there's nothing to talk about this week.
Just nothing. I don't know what we're going to do for content or material today. It's just very, very confusing to me. Our sponsors for this segment, L.A. Roberts Jewelers, committed to excellence in quality, design, and craftsmanship in historic downtown Martinsburg, and by the Washington Nationals. The Washington Nationals have a series of things that they want me to tell you, and one of them here is, well, let's talk about, no, that would be 80s, July the 20th, 80s night. Go Back to the Future on 80s night, presented by, well, that would be tonight, wouldn't it?
Tonight.
That is tonight, actually, July the 20th. Yeah, so it's presented by Budweiser. Saturday, July 21st, I guess also, no, that would be, this is confusing to me, Matt, because it says 80s night, July 20th, but it's presented by Budweiser on July 21st. I guess that means you can go to 80s Night tonight, stay all night, and drink Budweiser tomorrow. It's a whole weekend event. Anyway, we're happy to have Washington Nationals as a sponsor, and if you want to learn more, go to WashingtonNationals.com. That's all you need to do. Around the table, Delegate Jason Barrett. Mike Caryl stays with us, former tax commissioner and now retired lawyer and European traveler, and Joe Ferretti, who has now got a new law firm because his other partner, Dave Hammer, left him for better things. So you're all on your own.
Better things?
I want to better things. A judge. I mean, it doesn't get better than being a judge.
You can't imagine the pay cut he took.
Well,
to do better things.
Yeah, well, see, that's that's the definition of doing better things. Is you don't do it for the money. You do it for the public service.
That's good. That's beautiful spin, David. I love that.
Yeah,
that's why you're the pro.
Yeah, well, I just speaking of judges, let's start here, if you don't mind, unless there's an objection. I have to tell you that I've not followed on the live streaming this week the judiciary hearings, the Judiciary Committee hearings, so I don't know every detail, but I thought Jason Barrett might be up to date a little bit on what's going on the Supreme Court impeachment proceedings. Can you just give us a little bit of an update, and then we can make comments on that?
Well, they started again yesterday with hearings. I think they had hearings last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I believe, and I think they're yesterday, today, and I think they may have ruled out Saturday for this time. So it appears that they're working 2 days a week or so to get this through quickly. Yesterday they had the director and the assistant director for security for the court talk about some of the employees that were ordered by Justice Lawfrey to follow him to his house, move the furniture in, move the furniture out. One of them being the Albright, what is referred to as the Albright couch, which former Justice Albright was his couch in his office, not his personal couch, but the couch that was used in his office while he was there. And then also what we've heard so much about, the Cass Gilbert desk, which is the architect of the Capitol, and it was this original desk that was moved from the Capitol to Justice Lawfrey's house and then moved back by employees. There's also, they've been focusing on travel, particularly Justice Lawfrey and some of the conferences that he's been going to. And he's going to these conferences and racking up 400 and 500 miles on these cars, which it doesn't really sound like a big deal, because when you rent a car, there's a flat rate, there's a daily rate. It doesn't matter if you put 10 miles or 500 miles. But there's questioning about, did he need the car? Couldn't he just Uber or something to save the state's money? I think that's getting a little petty. My concern is, though, and I don't know if it's really been brought up yet or not, but if he's out here driving 400 or 500 miles at this conference, I've been to some legislative conferences, and I know we're in these conference rooms for 6 and 8 hours a day. So I'm not sure how he has the time at a conference to drive 500 miles. So, I would like to, if we were able to find out whether he's signing in, some of the conferences I go to, and there's kind of an hour-long meeting, and there's several of them a day, and they pass around a sign-in sheet, for accountability, and it's also, good for us, so that if anybody questions, we can prove, look, I was sitting here, and I don't know that anybody's really looked into Justice Lawfrey in those various court conferences or judicial conferences that he's been going to that there is this accountability, that he's actually there when he's in San Francisco for a conference and not just joyriding to see the sights of California. I think there's another one that he was at in Texas, I believe. It's several hundred miles there. So I hope they get to the bottom of it. I'd prefer that they work more than 2 days a week to actually get this done in time, but it appears that that's the will of the committee.
Mike, an observation from you on this? Do you see, from the attorney side, if nothing else?
Well, it's so disappointing, and I can say this because I'm mostly retired, but you start to wonder if Justice Lawfrey and any of the other justices, which is the scope of the impeachment hearing, had so little respect for their responsibilities. To what extent did that ultimately bleed over into their real job, which was to fairly judge cases? And I can go back to many cases I lost and say, well, that might be evidence of this lack of of a sense of responsibility, not because obviously I didn't think I was wrong or wouldn't have brought the case, but it really it goes to the heart of the fact that you even question, like, you know, and it's telling and it's legitimate that Jason brought up this question. That not only did he use his vehicle all the time, but do we know that he was even, you know, the purported purpose of it, was it even being carried out? I mean, that should just, you know, you shouldn't even think that way until you have this pattern. So I'm starting to think of how this pattern bleeds over into their actual work and the rulings they made over these years, and particularly Justice Lawfrey.
Joe, what should be in your mind, the standard for I know in the Constitution, it has several things written out as to what you can be impeached for. One of them is malmanagement. This would probably fall under malmanagement, I would think. Maybe there's another category, but this certainly doesn't rise to high crimes, which is usually the standard applied at the federal level for an impeachment. I don't think it does in the average person's mind. I think Jason even used the word, some of it seems kind of petty in a way. I can say as a taxpayer, as a voter in West Virginia, shouldn't there be another way to do this? Have him pay back whatever he got paid back for, but let's don't go through the whole part of an impeachment over these kinds of issues. Let's focus on the big issues. That's what I don't understand.
Well, when you get down to standards, I will refer to Justice Lawfrey's own book, where he advocated that certain
that book,
certain folks who hold certain jobs in society, and I think he cited police officers and others who have the public trust and are paid through public tax dollars, have a little higher duty in terms of the administration of their offices, how they conduct their personal affairs, how they conduct their public affairs. And when your activities bleed over to the point where you're soliciting help from other state workers to move furniture furtively, when you're talking to folks and saying, hey, this is what our policy is, right? Isn't that true? And you have those folks testifying now that they were in fear of their job if they didn't go along with some of this. That, to me, is where you lose confidence in the individual, and in the position he holds, you lose confidence in the institution. You can't have that.
And it goes back to the old adage that it isn't, you know, the crime, it's the cover-up that they burn you for, because those are usually slam dunk prosecutions, and that's what we have here. We have, you know, suborning perjury. We have all kinds of the cover-up. I agree with you. My initial reaction is this is just penny stuff. It's, you know, it's untoward and disappointing, but, you know, have them reimbursed for, you know, provable, you know, loss to the public treasury and move on. We know we'll take this into account, but it's not, you know, impeachable. But then the cover up, and that's why they're now I think 33. No, that was the judicial thing. 23
now. There were 22. They added one, right?
Counts now, including, you know, the cover-up type of
obstruction of justice, jury tampering. I mean, there's a lot of juicy stuff on there.
Well, Steve Canterbury is scheduled to testify next on July 26th.
Yeah, let's see who that is.
And Steve Canterbury, former Supreme Court administrator, chief administrator, he is going to testify on the 26th, and that's where the fireworks are going to start, because the story is that he was the person behind a lot of this reporting to Kenny Bass and the media in Charleston about what was going on behind the curtains at the Supreme Court. And now he's going to be put under oath and testifying. So there's going to be a lot of coverage of that next week.
Jason, are you pleased as a member of the House of Delegates that this proceeding has gone the way it should be going? I mean, is this? Do you have any criticism of it? Does it seem to be bipartisan?
It does. I think they're asking a lot of good questions. I think some of it is taking a little too long. I think they're kind of focusing on some things that you know, because there's 25 members of the committee. Everybody wants their time to ask a question with the TV cameras there, and so I think some of it gets a little redundant. They continue to kind of beat the same issue over and over. Working 2 days a week, at least for the committee, and I'm sure the staff is doing things and getting prepared for various witnesses and that type of thing. But I've been critical of them for not moving fast enough, and suggesting that some of the Republicans don't really want didn't want to move forward with that. And I know Craig Blair was critical of me last Friday when I wasn't here, but that's okay. But the issue is that if you
love being critical of you when you're not
yeah, well, that's the best time to do it.
It's a sport.
No, I get it.
It's even easier when you're not here.
Yeah, well, exactly. But
I know how you feel, by the way.
If you watch some of these hearings, there are a couple of delegates on the Judiciary Committee that are kind of asking questions in defense of Alan Lawfrey, and that's the kind of thing I was talking about. There are certain Republicans that don't want to impeach Lawfrey that have tried to put the brakes on this, and I never said that it was all of them. I never suggested it was Senator Blair, but that is going on, and all you have to do is watch those hearings, and you'll see that there are some of them coming to his defense and trying to make excuses for him.
Jason, and you'll know this, I'm just an amateur, but isn't there kind of a tactical, I won't call it strategic, political element to the pace of this? Am I right that if he's ultimately impeached and removed from office, but it happens after a certain date, then the governor's appointment to replace him would serve out the balance of his term and not have to stand for election at the next election?
No. I think that if it's done by August 14th, we'll have this race, this seat on the ballot this November.
I mean, Ketchum's will be for sure.
Yes,
because of the timing.
Before August 14th. If that happens with Lawfrey, if it's before August 14th, he will be on this election, this November. If not, the governor appoints after August 14th to serve out, I believe, just another 2 years.
Oh, the next general election.
And then there's an election then.
But there is a political element to that you want to push them to move it fast, and you're accusing Republicans of dragging their feet.
I'm suggesting that could be going on. One of the people that have said that he wants to run for the office, Speaker Armstead, it would be really easy to delay this and he get the appointment and then be able to not run for another 2 years. So
and whoever gets the appointment, the longer they can serve, the stronger their re-election chances.
Well, sure.
I mean, that's
absolutely.
That's what the politicians say, anyway.
Well, after 80 years of the Democrats making all those appointments, I guess it's probably only, I'm just teasing you, Jason.
84.
There's politics, I suspect, in everything. And speaking of politics, let's take this another step here, because obviously there is going to be an election, at least for the Menace Ketchum seat. There might be a second election if it gets done in time. So we might be voting for two. Who knows? We might be voting for a whole new Supreme Court in November. I mean, if they end up impeaching everyone. I don't think it's going to go that far, but it is possible. What are some of the candidates? Anybody know any candidates that are emerging? Are there groups forming? Are there coalitions getting together? Does the Trial Attorneys Association or the Chamber of Commerce? What are the politics of this as now people start to look at this seat and maneuver around, and I guess including who is the governor going to appoint to fill the unexpired term of Menace Ketchum, or is he going to do that? Any thoughts on that as we move forward, because the politics get real intriguing here, I think.
Well, they just appointed Dan Greer to the circuit court, and is that right? But he was mentioned, and of course the Speaker, Armstead, is the one that pops to mind, and on our side. But there might be two vacancies, and I really, I don't know. The U.S. Attorney is a former himself is a former Republican Party leader, Stewart. I think being a U.S. Attorney is probably a little better gig than West Virginia Supreme Court, but it's not necessarily. So I don't know.
David, I think that you're onto something. I think these groups are probably out recruiting candidates. These races are supposed to be nonpartisan and non-political, but they're not. So
let's elaborate on that just for a minute. They're supposed to be nonpartisan, but they're not.
I mean, they're nonpartisan on the ballot. All the players.
They don't have a Republican. They don't have an R or a D by their names.
Correct.
But they are still going to be supported by Democratic-oriented groups and Republican-oriented groups.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like a wink and a nod kind of thing, then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think that you'll see that each of these organizations probably come out and support a candidate. They're probably behind the scenes working to recruit candidates. I would think that possibly Evan Jenkins is considering this. I would think that, I don't know who from,
that's an interesting name for Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I'm hoping that we have a candidate from the Eastern Panhandle, and I don't have a name or know who that would be, but it would be nice to have somebody from the Eastern Panhandle in the court. I think that maybe...
I think everyone would probably agree with that. Have we had an Eastern Panhandle Supreme Court member ever?
I don't think so, and I think I would hope that even the Plans Bar would be in favor of somebody from the Eastern Panhandle, even if they weren't a member, one of their ranks.
Well, these two guys would look good in robes, wouldn't they, Jason? Both of them, Mike and Joe.
But the political thing is, especially in my case, is they want somebody that's young enough to run and get reelected in 12-year terms, and that's.
So you're saying you're out? Is that
I'm
what
out.
you're telling us?
I'm announcing that right now.
And I'm probably too old too.
That's interesting too. That's serious. They'd be looking for a younger.
Well, it's because there's elections is not the same as the U.S. Supreme Court. Where you go for the youngest.
A lifetime for a lifetime.
Right. Yeah. But that principle still.
At a certain age, 12 years seems like a lifetime. So is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I get
absolutely.
that. So let's take Joe and Mike here, the two of you. Joe, you are a Democrat, and Mike, you are a Republican. You are both very successful, respected attorneys in the Eastern Panhandle. Would it be likely that the two of you would support different people for the job or to run for state Supreme Court because you come from two different perspectives politically?
Well, I think Mike raises an interesting point. We might, if there was an idea of somebody from elsewhere in the state was going to be selected for this or appointed. But I think we would agree that it's high time that somebody from the Eastern Panhandle get on that court. I can only recall John Yoder, the late John Yoder, running for Supreme Court up here locally. I think he was the one and only candidate that I remember since I've been up here.
Didn't he give up his state Senate seat to run for Supreme Court?
Yeah, he ran for Supreme Court when he was out, not in the Senate, or maybe he was going out. I can't even remember the timing of it. But I think Joe's right. And for instance, Mike Lawrenson is I think a tremendous judge, a brilliant guy. He was my law partner, but he certainly tends, politically to be a Democrat, and I would like to think Joe might think he would be a good candidate for the West Virginia Supreme Court.
Yeah. I hate to lose it.
It's just an example, and yeah,
that's the problem.
And I would also offer up Judge Wilkes in that same vein.
And some of the other local judges are relatively new and probably would not be interested.
Of course, Joe's former partner would come to mind on his side, but he's just getting started as a judge.
Yeah.
And by the way, you do not have to be a judge to be a Supreme Court.
You have to be a lawyer.
Remember, you have to be a lawyer, right?
Well, Mike, do you feel though that let's just select Mike Lawrenson just for discussion purposes. I know nothing about Mike's intentions, but do you think he would stand a chance in an appointment process since he is a Democrat?
Well, predicting what Governor Justice would do in anything is fraught with peril. Whether he put his Democrat hat on or his Republican hat on. I think it depends on who was supporting. If the state chamber or BIC got behind Mike Lawrence, I think Justice might appoint him. If it was just the trial lawyers or the unions, he might not.
Well, I think it's time. We have never, I don't think we've ever had somebody from the Eastern Panhandle on the Supreme Court.
I think you're right.
I think what makes a race like this interesting, too, is that the time. You only have 3 months. You have 90 days, basically, to announce, organize, get funded, get on television and do all the things that a candidate has to do. And there might be multiple candidates running. So it almost suggests that in order to run, you either have to have an organization with money behind you already, or you have to be a self-funder, because you don't really have the time to go out and raise the money in a conventional kind of way that most candidates would think of doing over a period of a long time.
But I think that there's public money available, and there's that system in place. I assume it would be available in a special election.
I would think so. My question would be, with this such short notice, how do you meet all the qualifications to qualify for public funding? Because, and Mike, you may know more of those details than I do, but I think there are a lot of hoops you have to jump through to be able to qualify for that public financing. But David, to your point, I think it probably takes somebody that has access to a substantial amount of money. Having some name ID already would certainly go a long way, and then geography, where what your county is going to say on the ballot. I think because it's going to be very hard if you have a field of candidates. It's going to be very hard for somebody to break out. Now, I've watched some of these Supreme Court races in the past, and there's probably 2 or 3 that I can say have run really good campaigns. Everybody else just kind of gets elected on who's endorsing them and kind of their name ID. So if somebody was going to get into this Supreme Court race, they better run a top-notch campaign, and they better have someone that's running their campaign that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, because there's just not a lot of time. As we said, between now and election, this is really a sprint. It's like a race where you're running the last lap,
and because it's nonpartisan, it's self-nominating. You could have, like we had the last time, there'd be a whole array of candidates. It's not limited to the nominees of the parties.
That's a great point, because back in the old days when it was partisan, at least there was some built-in, some semblance of built-in organization there on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. It was a little bit more organized. I think this could be really chaotic come November, I would imagine, and without very much time to raise your name ID and to get very known. And of course, in judicial races, you're supposed to stay away from issues that distinguish you too. So you don't go out and you don't go out and bash the other guy. That's just not the way, at least in this area, judicial races are run. Maybe they get away with a little bit more at the Supreme Court level in terms of bringing certain things up. It seems that way, that they step out a little bit more on the issues.
They do personally, but also the outside money. There's a lot of influence there in terms of the discussion of the issues, because the outside influence is the money. And I go back to the
outside PACs that come in and try and influence the election.
I go out to when Blankenship bankrolled Benjamin. I mean, that was a pretty tough campaign involving Warren McGraw.
Lots to talk about after the break. I think I'm going to throw this out when we come back. I'm interested as always, in the Manchin-Morrissey race. I'm interested in why Prosperity for America has pulled out of the campaign to be critical of Joe Manchin. Maybe we have some opinions on that. I hope everyone will stay with us. You're listening to Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave, Jason Barrett, Mike Caryl, Joe Ferretti, and what's your name again? Matt Miller. We'll all be back after this. Stay with us.
Here's what happened when they decided to cut loose. They headed down to old El Paso. That's where they ran into a great big hassle. Billy Joe shot.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by TerraWorks Relief.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. 2 more bodies have been pulled from a lake in Branson, Missouri. That brings the total number killed to 13 when a duck boat flipped and sank during a powerful storm last night. Officials say divers are searching Table Rock Lake for 4 others still missing. Of the 14 who survived, 7 are injured. CBS News transportation safety analyst Mark Rosenker.
These vessels have had issues in the past. The NTSB has investigated a number of these duck boat accidents, but even with that said, they have been operating since World War II, and for the most part, we do not see very many accidents.
President Trump tweets sympathies to families and friends of the victims. He calls it a tragedy and a great loss. The president is threatening to up the ante yet again in the trade conflict with China. He tells CNBC he's ready to slap $500 billion worth of tariffs on imports to even out a trade imbalance.
I'm doing this to do the right thing for our country. We have been ripped off by China for a long time. And I told that to President Xi.
S&P futures are down 7, Dow futures off 126. A father whose 2 children survived the massacre at Stoneman Douglas High has been killed himself in an apparent robbery.
The robbery happened inside a small convenience store. The security video shows the suspect following owner Ayub Ali around the counter. Ali appears to put his hands up. The man left with money but returned to shoot him. His friend Joaquin Nieves.
I was helping him to move some furniture for his wife because he's going to buy some furniture for his wife. And I was telling him,
Everybody be careful cuando tú con tu chavo adelante. You know how you count the money? You don't watch them, you know?
Two of Ali's children survived the Parkland school shootings. The robber got $500 in cash. Peter King, CBS News, Orlando.
Police are blaming the deaths of two toddlers on their parents for leaving them in cars or vans in the hot weather. One in Houston, the other in West Haven, Connecticut. CBS's Chris Van Cleve says the problem of distraction is particularly dangerous in the summer.
It underscores just how important it is to pay attention. And it's as simple as, checking that rear view mirror and looking in the back seat, or just, some parents talk about they leave a shoe on the front seat, or some way of trying to remind themselves that the kid is back there.
It could wind up being McDonald's most popular promotion ever.
How do you know you're going to love the taste of these fries?
It's Free Fries Friday at the hamburger chain. Every Friday from here to the end of the year, you can get an order of free medium-sized fries. Only thing you have to do is download the app and spend at least $1. This is CBS News.
To experience relief from foot and leg cramps, use TheraWorks Relief. Get TheraWorks Relief today in the pain relief aisle at your local pharmacy. Ask your pharmacist for TheraWorks Relief. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter posts your job to over 100 job boards with just one click, and then their smart matching technology finds the right candidates. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. To prevent muscle cramps in your legs and feet, use TheraWorks Relief. This fast-acting foam is clinically proven to relieve leg and foot cramps. Get TheraWorks Relief today at select Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid pharmacies, or TheraWorksRelief.com. Ask your pharmacist for a TheraWorks Relief.
It's time to join the millions of people that meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. Zoom gives you flawless video, crystal clear audio, and instant sharing across any mobile, tablet, or desktop device. But the best thing about Zoom? It just works. So ditch the distractions, join the movement, and meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. Visit Zoom.us to set up your free account today. That's Zoom.us. Zoom video conferencing.
Now your local news from Talk Radio WRNR. The Martinsburg Police Department yesterday announced the 29th initiation of the city's drug house ordinance for the owner-occupied rental property at 418 West John Street. After a successful undercover surveillance and drug investigation, they found the residence was the hub of an illegal drug selling operation in the area conducted by the tenants, Casey Silver and Tori Stotler. Police executed a search warrant on Monday, during which they discovered drug paraphernalia and found 3 young children living in those harsh conditions. Workforce West Virginia says the state's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate declined 0.1 of a percentage point to 5.3% in June, the number of unemployed residents falling by 300 to 42,000. Total unemployment was up by 3,200 people over the year. West Virginia's not seasonally adjusted unemployment rate climbed 0.3 of a percentage point to 5.4% last month. I'm Adam Boardman, Talk Radio WRNR News.
Local forecast. Weatherman Bob Kukin.
The Friday morning weather maps showing the high pressure system that's been keeping things dry and sunny for us, moving off to the east, off the coast now, and off to our west. It's a broad area of low pressure that's going to bring quite a bit of shower activity here to us for the next 4 or 5 days once we get into the weekend. Today itself, sunny and nice. The highs in the middle 80s. The winds light southeasterly. Clouds thicken up overnight with lows in the mid-60s. And then already by tomorrow, the chance for some afternoon showers developing, maybe a thunder shower too, with a high near 80. And expect some rain on Sunday throughout the day with a high near 80. I'm Bob Kukin, Talk Radio WRNR.
The future doesn't wait. Why should you? Blue Ridge Community and Technical College offers over 50 degree and certificate programs in education, IT, culinary arts, engineering, and so much more. Small class sizes, flexible schedules with evening and online classes, with affordable tuition, plus financial aid is available to those who qualify. Now you can go to college. Visit us online at blueridgectc.edu. That's blueridgectc.edu. Stop waiting and enroll today.
The WVU Medicine Spring Mills office building is now open. This new 3-story, 40,000 square foot facility is conveniently located off Interstate 81, exit 20 at the intersection of US 11 and Campus Drive. The WVU Medicine Spring Mills medical office building features many different offices and services for area residents. It's now home to urgent care, women's imaging center, lab services, and primary care pediatrics. The WVU Medicine Spring Mills office building now open to serve you.
L.A. Roberts is Berkeley County's oldest jeweler, where every season is new and exciting. In fact, new is old school to us, and though it's nothing new, our old traditions like exceptional service, quality, and value maintain L.A. Roberts Jewelers as the old master among so many new kids on the block. Whether you're a newcomer or part of the old guard, entrust all your fine jewelry needs to L.A. Roberts, Old World Jewelers for a new age, in historic downtown Martinsburg.
Little League All-Star Baseball. Wrapping this one up as Jefferson gets the victory and will advance to the state tournament as the district runner-up. It's the 10 to 12-year-old state tournament from Huntington beginning this Friday as Jefferson County takes on Cerrito Canova. The game time is at 2. Ryan Epling provides coverage beginning with a 1:45 pregame show right here on Talk Radio WRNR, the local leader in talk, news, sports.
Welcome back into the second half of Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave. Rob's still out. Matt Miller in for Rob, as he has been all week. Matt, it's kind of been fun hanging out with you this week.
It's been a good week.
It gets you out of just talking about sports. That must be fun for you.
Talking sports or talking
although
something
talking
different?
sports all the time would be kind of fun, too, I would imagine.
Yeah, either one. I just feel like I have more knowledge and interest in the sports realm sometimes than subject matter that may appear on this program.
Your voice is still a little hoarse, I see.
Just a little.
Yeah, but is it coming back?
It's coming back better than it was, but...
How could anybody lose their voice on this show with David Welch?
Well, it wasn't.
How did you lose your voice?
It was the early 2 hours.
I think it was Matt Crawford and he got into a fight at 5 o'clock, actually. I think that was probably it. Our sponsors for this segment, thanks, Jason. Joe Ferretti Law Office is delivering first-rate service and results for our clients. That would be the man sitting right next to me, by the way. And Brown Funeral Homes and Cremations, Robert Fields & Sons, a family-owned full-service funeral home that has proudly served our area since 1880. If you want to join in on the political discussion today, and we urge you to do that because your opinions are probably far better than ours, and we'd love to listen to them. Our number is here, 304-263-6540 and 263-6586. You can listen to the program, of course, on 740 AM, 106.5 FM, cable channel 10, streaming on Talk Radio WRNR, or you can download our download our app on WRNR Talk Radio. Savon Hunter, our intern, and Sherry Dieter Davis, our producer. Savon Hunter, before we go on into further political talk, I wanted to just get your read on our question of the day yesterday, in which about 17 or 1,800 views have been generated on that, and tons of comments. Everybody wanted to tell us what the car they drove when they took their first driving test. What were some of the best ones, do you think?
I know nothing about cars, so I couldn't tell you what's good and what's bad.
But what car did you drive in your driver's test?
It was a Chrysler.
A Chrysler?
Something.
A Chrysler something.
I don't even remember.
I remember that car, the Chrysler something. Don't you guys remember that car? Good car. I thought the 49 Studebaker was a good one. That's one I remember. That must have been from someone who is either a car nut or is, older than I am, but that was a good one. Okay, we might have a question of the day today. I think maybe should Mike Caryl continue on the Friday morning program? I don't know. We'll probably think of a good one, get a poll out on that. I suspect in this audience it would probably be an overwhelming yes. It's just my guess. Let's talk, guys, about, again, as we have in the past, and I like to visit it every once in a while, and that's the U.S. Senate race and things that happened during the course of the campaign that could ultimately influence this very important campaign in November. Republican Patrick Morrisey against Democratic candidate and incumbent Joe Manchin. We talked briefly with Mac Warner today about the Blankenship factor. Thoughts, and they might be legal thoughts, not political. Does Blankenship ultimately get on this ballot? Because I think we would all agree that if he is on the ballot in November, it hurts Morrissey. Agree or disagree on that? I think we're probably all okay with that. Mike Caryl, let me turn to you. Does he stay on the ballot?
Does he get on the ballot?
Does he get on the ballot?
I predict no. This very situation was contemplated by the legislature. As Jason pointed out, there may be some effective date issues about the bad loser, sore loser rule, and how it applies. But I say he does not get on the ballot. That's also a subjective hope of mine because I'm supporting Morrissey.
Now, and I guess the other question would be is if can the courts take into consideration that this is a federal race and not a state race, and the state legislature made a law. Does that only apply then to state races, or does it also apply to federal campaigns?
I believe that the U.S. Constitution leaves the mechanics and the rules of elections to each state.
So chances are the sore loser law may apply to Blankenship, and he doesn't get
even
on
though it's
it.
a federal office. Yes.
Process-wise, the Secretary of State, when he was on earlier today, seemed to suggest that he will take the signatures. They will validate the signatures. If he qualifies for them at that point in time, I suppose he validates in his role as Secretary of State that he has enough signatures and can go on the ballot.
He sought legal opinions, and of course, as he pointed out, the Attorney General's office has a conflict, so they've engaged counsel to advise the Secretary Warner. So he will take that into account and that advice, and then make his ruling.
Why is John Blankenship so motivated to be on the ballot and hurt Patrick Morrissey? Is it simply because he lost in a primary to him?
No. It doesn't have anything to do with Patrick Morrissey.
He opposes Patrick Morrissey.
Well, no, I mean, it adversely affects Patrick Morrissey for sure. Just as it, No,
but he's actually been very vocal in his
Well,
dislike
that's
for
because
Patrick
he's
Morrissey.
the guy, but it's all about Blankenship's revenge. And what he feels is a raw deal that he got, or he argues and, fills out a lot of details. It's persuasive if it's true. That he did get a raw deal, that there was wrong, bad influence and missteps and in violation of his rights by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that there was exonerating information that the prosecution has to provide the defense about the way that the mine safety group handled the investigation, as well as the rules that were being applied that were concurrent with the disaster.
Okay, but he clearly knows as a third-party candidate that he cannot win the general election. He clearly knows. He has to understand that the best that he can do is hurt someone, and he knows he's going to hurt Patrick Morrissey. So doesn't it make sense that he has a personal vendetta against Patrick Morrissey for the kind of campaign that Morrissey ran against him in the primary?
That probably rubbed him wrong way too, but the drive, why he's spending huge sums of his own money is all about revenge and vindication for himself, and Morrissey's in his way. Patrick Morrissey is a tough, aggressive campaigner. I'm sure that made it somewhat worse. But you remember that televised debate? It was Morrissey and Jenkins were. Blankenship didn't get nearly as much airtime, but when he did, he was like he was above their bickering. So I don't think that he's out to. Morrissey's in his way and is an obstacle to his revenge. That's the way I read Blankenship.
I read it differently. I think it's personal vendetta against Patrick Morrissey because of the negative campaigning in the primary.
David, I tend to agree with you because I don't think that had Evan Jenkins won that primary, I don't think Don Blankenship gets in this race. There was never that animosity with Blankenship to Jenkins, to Tom Willis, or to anyone else in that race. It was only focused at Morrissey.
Agreed.
And Morrissey was really the only one that attacked Blankenship back. Now, certainly Blankenship, he was on the attack a good bit as well. And I just don't know that was the best strategy for the Attorney General at that time. Now, he won, and he won fairly convincingly, I think. So that stuff that those negative attacks on Blankenship were probably unnecessary, and now that may have helped fueled, this right, or this not the Blankenship getting back on the ballot in the Constitution Party.
I misspoke before the break. I mentioned Americans for Prosperity were pulling out of their ad campaign that essentially seeks an outcome favorable to Patrick Morrissey by going against Joe Manchin. It was a group called One Nation, which is a outside political super PAC that is supported by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. They're the ones that have pulled out. Now, why this is interesting, I think, to all of us, is that you've got $750,000 ad campaign that had been devoted from this organization to television advertising in West Virginia. That's a fairly substantial buy. And you have, at the same time, you've got Brett Kavanaugh, who is a Supreme Court nominee by President Trump in the Senate, and they're trying to get to 51 votes. Is there a connection there between the politics that goes on in the Senate? In other words, does Mitch McConnell go to Joe Manchin, or Joe Manchin go to Mitch McConnell and essentially make a deal? Pull those ads and you have my vote. Is politics that crass?
Yes. You can't help but wonder if a deal's not being cut right now. And I'm looking at a op-ed in the Registered Herald from the newspaper from Beckley, West Virginia. Jerry Falwell Jr. pens this and basically says if Manchin wants to remain as a U.S. Senator, he's going to vote for Kavanaugh. So
I totally believe that.
So if that calculation is taking place, and I agree too, I think in West Virginia, more so than other states, the Supreme Court issue, I think, had a lot to do with Trump being so wildly popular in West Virginia, and I think that's going to permeate into this Senate race. Manchin's going to know that, so this could easily just be, it's Occam's razor, right? The easiest explanation is often, or the most simplest explanation is often the right one, which is he's cut a deal, he's going to vote for Kavanaugh. McConnell says, okay, I'll pull my money out, we're not going to run against you.
Shelley Moore Cavato, when we had her on a couple of weeks ago, said that the way she sizes this up is that there will be no Democratic votes unless the Republicans can get to 50 first. Is that something that Mike, agree, disagree? Jason?
I think that's the smartest political strategy. I think it's the obvious political strategy. So I think that's possible. But I'm not so sure that there's this deal cut between Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin at this point. I think if you look at the 5 races that One Nation was targeting, it was West Virginia, North Dakota, Nevada, Arizona, and Indiana. If you look at the polls,
all red states represented by Democrats.
And if you look at the races right now, the one with the biggest point spread right now is Manchin over Morrissey in all the polling. So I don't know that they have a deal struck yet. I think that this may be a way to try to help Manchin along, say, look, we're backing off of you. We need to seriously have you consider Kavanaugh, and we, at the end of the day, we really need your support. So I don't know that it's already a done deal. I think this is part of the Republicans' plan to try to get Manchin to come over.
And it may be, the deal may be that if Kavanaugh nomination is approved, you do what you need to do, then we'll stay backed off. But if it isn't, we're coming back, because there's going to be a vote on Kavanaugh well before the election.
One of the other things that fascinates me about this campaign, and I think as we all know that in midterm elections and primaries, that oftentimes the winner of these races, because you don't have the great turnout that you have in a presidential race, that it really is whose base is most energized. So if you take all of these issues that are going on in the country, you look at did Trump embarrass America or make America proud in Helsinki? Everyone's going to have different opinions about it. Are you angry enough at Trump to go out and just vote for anyone who isn't a Republican? All of those things kind of get mixed in here. So I'm wondering, and I can't figure this out, whose base is more energized, or whose base in West Virginia seems more energized come this November, because that's going to have an impact on this campaign.
I think nationwide, I think the Democratic base is more energized. I think that's probably not the case in West Virginia. I think it's probably more even, which if for the Democrats in West Virginia, if we can just go back to having our base just as energized as Republicans, that's a huge help to us, because we've been, a 12 or 13 point, generic R over D in the past couple elections. We can get that just back to zero. I think that there are a lot of legislative races that we can play in. One of the things that, if you go back to some of this, the stuff with Manchin and what One Nation was going to do, I think that's equally as important. That was $750,000 that they were going to spend to say that Joe Manchin is weak on immigration, because that polls really high in West Virginia. Now, you've seen what Manchin has done in the past couple of months with some of the ads, whether his campaign ran them or an outside group did. It was about his support of the wall. So there's been polling done. I think it's important for people to understand how polling works, is that, if Joe Manchin or someone affiliated with his campaign are trying to help his campaign, they try to find out what the positives are for him and the negatives, and they do that for his opponent as well. Clearly, the thing that would hurt Manchin the most was his stance on immigration, about being weak on immigration, which is why I think you've seen these outside groups run ads saying that he supports the wall, and they're trying to, define him as being strong on immigration before these negative attacks come out. So I don't know if, because that's the way they were going to attack Manchin, he's already defined himself in the past couple of months, that also played into why they're not going to run some of these ads.
Of course, on the Morrissey side, they say, well, of course he's going to do all of those things because it's an election year. But if you vote for Manchin, he's going to go right back, next time. You're going to have 6 years of, what they would say is a liberal record. So the tension is, of course, Manchin's doing what he needs to do to be reelected. He wants to be reelected, and Morrissey is going to try and refute. It must be frustrating on the Morrissey side to refute that, because a vote for Kavanaugh is still a vote for Kavanaugh. Manchin would have gone 2-0 on Trump Supreme Court nominees. I mean, he can point to a number of things where he said, hey, wait a minute, I've been on Trump's side on a number of important issues.
It surprises me that immigration does poll was such a big issue in West Virginia.
Why does that surprise you?
We don't have a huge problem with sanctuary cities and all the debate and all that. I mean,
but it does energize voters in West Virginia.
Yeah, and again, that made me feel out of touch with my my fellow West Virginians, because I get fired up about it in a hopefully in a restrained sense, because amnesty is not a dirty word to somebody that administered tax amnesty in the state of West Virginia. It's get right with the system, and we'll waive a few penalties, or we'll let you fix your default. That's all amnesty is, but that's a bad word in a lot of conservative circles. But Manchin's one of the biggest strikes against him, and part of the reason why there's any race is he's voted against the tax cut, and the Republicans are talking about the 2.0, where they would make permanent the reduction of the individual rates, and that would be a great opportunity for Joe Manchin to get right on a huge issue that I know is a huge issue in West Virginia and all over the country. So is the tax bill.
Another interesting issue that Manchin's running on, and I just want to throw this out here, he's making health care an issue, and specifically making the taking away of health care for hundreds of thousands of West Virginians. He is, a lot of that's centered around making sure that pre-existing conditions don't go away with any kind of changes in the Affordable Care Act. Is this a winner issue for Joe Manchin? Is this an issue that he should be campaigning on, this issue of saying, if you vote for Pat Morrissey, you will not have your health, you will not be covered anymore? Does that work?
What was Manchin's vote on Obamacare?
I think the Mike, I mean, if you're
was he in the Senate then? Yeah. Now I'm thinking that was
he was not
2010, right?
Senator Byrd voted.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but now I do. Joe?
Yeah, I think that issue is going to resonate. Polling in West Virginia shows that health care is an important issue for West Virginians. West Virginia did, I think, disproportionately benefit from the Medicaid expansion and other things that took place in West Virginia compared to other states. And he was the lead sponsor of that resolution in the Senate yesterday.
Yes, he was.
Talking about pre-existing conditions. Interestingly, some of those red state senators got on with them as sponsorship. So clearly they have the polling that shows that is what obviously would be a traditional Democratic issue, and that they're going to go with that, including these senators in some of these red states.
Yeah, and that might not be an issue that is felt a lot here in the Eastern Panhandle. We probably have a higher number of voters that have adequate health insurance, but if you go to other
through the government.
Yeah, exactly. However that works. But if you go to other parts of the state, I agree
it goes with their jobs, not
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
not with being,
through federal employment.
But it also draws a clear. It really doesn't that issue draw a clear contrast with Pat Morrissey and Joe Manchin as well.
Sure.
So recent polling, back to the recent polling, the most recent polls we have are now about 4 or 5 weeks old. It shows a 10 to 12% gap between with Manchin leading somewhere around the 50% mark, Morrissey somewhere around the 40% mark. And one of the really revealing things in there, in both polls, is that Morrissey is underperforming, meaning he's not winning all the Republicans. He's below what he needs to be with Republicans. Why is it a Republican would not be for Pat Morrissey? I'm not sure I understand that. Anybody have an insight on that?
I don't either. And who are there's Republicans and Republicans, as we know, David, and
there are Democrats and Democrats.
I don't know. Well, that's to be true. I mean, we certainly have Jason here, and then
Mike, if all Republicans
that replaces him every once in a while.
If all Republicans had to agree with you, we'd have 9 people in our party.
I think the people that Trump got a pretty good margin on the Electoral College. I agree. We had to rely on the Electoral College, which is that's part of the great Constitution of the United States.
That could be a whole different topic. Is the Republican Party now become the party?
Well, I'm very skeptical of the polls, and some of these that show this.
Why are you skeptical?
Because they've been shown to be wrong very frequently.
All right.
Including the last presidential election. It just. Are
they worthy of discussion, do you think?
Well, no, I'm not saying they're not worthy. We need to talk about something here and fill this airtime. But it's. Do
you have a substitute topic?
Just like there's Republicans and Republicans, there's polls and there's polls, and they're not equal by any means.
I've often felt in my life that when the polls aren't going your way, you dispute the validity of the poll, but when they are going your way, you really enjoy, not you personally, but people in general enjoy.
Well, my instinct is if you're in a campaign, you're starting to feel good because the polls are going your way, double your effort.
So what's your gut sense of polls aside? What's your gut sense of where this race is right now?
I think it's close. Senator Manchin has a long time following, a wonderful reputation, but he's made some missteps, and the worse that the National Democratic Party gets, the more that affiliation with it hurts him in West Virginia, because it is antithetical to the philosophy of the great number of West Virginians.
When you're making up your mind in this race, there's going to be some voters who are going to say, I just trust Joe Manchin more than I trust Patrick Morrissey. I've known him longer. I trust him. There's going to be other people that are going to go simply on the issues. Is this race a personal trust race, or is it an issues race?
I see 2 to 3 points in this race just because Joe's been here forever and Morrissey hasn't. I think Morrissey does not have the network of Republicans built up over time to rely on.
Yeah, and your original question, David, was why would a Republican vote for Joe Manchin? Well, the obvious answer is because they've been doing it for some time now. But also, if you look into southern West Virginia, where Morrissey didn't really perform that well against Jenkins and Blankenship, you're going to have some of those folks that are, maybe some of more of the Evan Jenkins supporters of the Republicans who, Evan Jenkins was a former Democrat, kind of a more of a moderate guy who really tried to move to the right in that primary. But I think a lot of those voters, it could vote for Manchin. I think, from a personality standpoint, I think Joe Manchin comes across as far more likable. Patrick Morrissey is always aggressive. He's always on the attack. And I think Joe just has the ability to win people over just from talking to him. And as you have said on the show so many times, our 2 senators in West Virginia are Joe and Shelley. Everybody has met them. Everybody knows them. And they both have very likable personalities.
I find it remarkable that there's very little undecided in this state right now for U.S. Senate. I think most people who are going to vote in this race already know right now in the middle of July who they're voting for, and all of this money and all of this activity is going to be a battle over about 9% of the undecided voters. And that is just, pretty darn interesting to me.
Well, and Jason, I agree with Jason, that, but one thing that Manchin has gone for him is Morrissey's power is the northern swath. That's how he won the primary for sure.
Absolutely. And he won it convincingly.
And Joe Manchin has a significant core right in the middle of supporters, right in the middle of that northern swath.
And it all comes down to turnout and to whose base is energized, because I think everyone's decided who they're going to vote for. The question is, will they turn out? Let that be the last word for the U.S. Senate race today. We're going to take a short break. You're listening to Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave. We'll be back with Jason, Mike, Joe, and Matt, and myself. Stay with us. Thank you.
For the summer clearance event at Miller's Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Martinsburg, where you can get up to $11,250 in total savings on a 2018 Ram Bighorn. Pay just $229 a month with $3,499 down. How about a 2019 Jeep Cherokee for only $189 a month with $34.99 down and up to $4,000 cash back? Get $3,250 off a 2018 Dodge Challenger or Charger with payments as low as $179 per month. Going green? Check out the 2018 Hybrid Pacifica with a $7,500 federal tax credit. These savings and more are available at the summer clearance event at Miller's Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram on Kelly Island Road or online at millerschryslerjeep.com. Your Chrysler certified pre-owned dealer. All payments based on approved credit, taxes, tags, and processing fees extra. See dealer for details.
Let's face it, sometimes local is just better. Locally grown, locally sourced, shop local, eat local. But what about local expertise? At Allstate, Gary Kelly is just that, a local. So contact Martinsburg Allstate agent Gary Kelly today so he can help you with protection that's right for you and the things you love most. Call 304-263-4596. Allstate, are you in good hands? Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Assurance Company, Northbrook, Illinois. Allstate Vehicle and Property Insurance Company.
I'm Joe Ferretti of Ferretti Law Office. The most common question I hear from people injured in an automobile wreck or because someone else was at fault is, can their insurance company do that? If you call Ferretti Law Office at 264-8505, I will answer that question and other questions you have for free. Get educated and get ready to fight back. Call 264-8505 to protect your rights and get the compensation you deserve. Put my 31 years of personal injury and trial experience to work for you. At Ferretti Law Office, we're here to help.
Downtown Martinsburg is the place to be for the Fridays at 5 Summer Concert Series from June 1st through August 31st. Enjoy great music and fun with well-known musicians, bands, and Martinsburg artists that'll liven up your spirits at the town square. Concerts begin at 5 p.m. and usually last until 7. Enjoy great music while visiting Martinsburg's Farmers Market, housed on East King Street, where you're able to enjoy fresh fruits and veggies, chicken and pork, and a lot more. Pets are allowed in the square during the concerts, provided they're on a 6-foot leash or less. For the full concert Summer Series lineup, go to mainstreetmartinsburg.com.
Welcome back into Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave. Our final segment of the week, Matt. We're almost home, but when we've got so many of these great experts together, we've got to keep on going right to the end. We can't quit early. So thank you, everyone, for staying with us. Our phone number here is 304-263-6540 and 263-6586. Our sponsor for this segment, Bechtel Jewelers, West Virginia's largest Pandora retailer on Route 11 South Inwood, next to Viva. Okay, I say Mexico. What do you say, Jason? Mexico. You're probably a Mexico guy, right?
Yeah, Mexico.
Okay, next to Viva Mexico. All right, this last week has been, I would think, a week that, in my mind, President Trump would like to forget. Regardless of what you think about the press conference he had with Putin, that every day there's a retraction to what he said before. This doesn't seem to me the kind of White House that any president would want to have, this topsy-turvy roller coaster, self-generated controversy, culminating in my mind with so many different highlights. One was when the Secretary of State's office and the White House are saying two completely different things. That comes to my mind. Another one was yesterday on a panel, I think it was out in Colorado somewhere at the Aspen Institute, where Dan Coates, the senior intelligence person, was told by a reporter that the president had invited Putin to the White House. And actually, it was a pretty funny exchange if you happen to see it, because what Coates ended up saying is, well, that will be interesting, or that will be special. This seems to me to be a White House with no message, totally chaotic, being run out of the mind of one person, Donald Trump, who doesn't seem to understand history very well. And I don't mean to be overly critical, but the performance at the press conference I happened to be listening to when I was driving on the radio, and I want him to succeed. But I want this president to do well. I don't want anyone to misunderstand that. I'm not a Donald Trump basher. But I was concerned listening to this press conference on the radio as I drove up Interstate 95 on Monday of I seemed to hear that he was actually saying that he believed Vladimir Putin more than his own intelligence experts. Jason, is that what you heard on Monday?
I mean, I think that's what pretty much everybody that listened to it objectively heard. I think that was, well, I was talking about you, Mike. Absolutely. I mean, and I try not to be too critical of the president either. Everybody wants him to be, the country to be successful, but I have yet to hear him say that he believes that Russians meddled in the election. Has he said that?
Yes, he said it many, many, many times. I absolutely agree that the way he handled the press conference was ambiguous and weak and not assertive enough and clear enough that Putin has led an attack on the United States.
Do you think Putin played the president on Monday in the press conference?
Well, he's a KGB, yes. And
does that make you feel good that we have a president that appears weak next to our enemy?
No, it doesn't make me feel good, but it is absolutely not true that Donald Trump said that he believed Putin and not the intelligence services. He left a vague impression that he wasn't sure, and that's horrible. That's horrible. I'm totally with you on that.
All right, we agree then.
And Donald Trump is a horribly flawed person in many ways, and this is one of the least professional White House operations that we've ever had. But what the saving grace to me and the tens of millions of Trump supporters, still supporters in this country, is that it is absolutely clear through all the misstatements and confusion and retractions and everything that he absolutely loves the country and is totally dedicated to his core in advancing its interests. And plus, he's a guy that knows how to get things done. In reality, the messaging is horrible, and all that process that I know, David, you focus on more than content is really they're bad at it, and they should get an F. But Trump has been tough on Russia. Now,
Mike, I don't focus any more on that than content than you do on having the same answer for everything when something comes up about Donald Trump. So let's say,
did I just not criticize him severely?
He loves his country. Okay, we know that. But on this case, he didn't come across as being, as you just
absolutely
admitted,
agree.
And I want to know should it matter? Does it matter?
Well,
were you embarrassed by him?
I was. You could say I was embarrassed. I regretted that it came out the way it did, and it was another example to me of Trump's that he can't. When you talk just the word Russian and elections, all he thinks about is the accusation that he colluded with the Russians to win the election, and it challenges his legitimacy as president. That's all he hears. He is incapable, because of his ego and his obsession with that point, to distinguish between the collusion that for which there's no evidence and the attempt to interfere for which there's overwhelming evidence.
Usually when it comes up, he starts talking about Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania and the electoral vote total in those states. Joe, let me put this question to you, and everyone can have a bite at this. But I can't help but wonder if Barack Obama and stood next to Vladimir Putin and said what Donald Trump said, that the Republicans would be hysterical.
Yeah, they'd be losing their lunch. And that's what I can't get my head around, the fact that people just absolutely go out of their head over NFL players kneeling during the national anthem. But when your president stands up and says, basically, I can't buy what my intelligence agencies are telling me and have been telling me since 2 weeks before the inauguration that the Russians were involved and that Putin was pushing the button on those operations. I don't understand how you square that. I mean, just to me, it doesn't make any sense. And I know we got a debate here about content versus procedures in terms of foreign policy. In my mind, everything I've learned is that protocol and procedures in foreign policy is just as important as content. It's the idea of going into a meeting with your number one military adversary, not having had a cabinet level meeting about it in advance, not talking to your National Security Council in advance, instead playing golf at Turnberry before you meet with President Putin. That to me is just bizarre. And what happens is when you don't follow protocol and you don't involve your experts to get advice, you think, hey, I've been preparing for this meeting all my life because I've been cutting real estate deals in Manhattan. This is what happens. This is the net result. You go out on the world stage and you fumble all over yourself. That's the problem here. And I think protocol and procedures are just as important, and this guy's got to learn that.
I don't totally disagree with you, Joe, but I do think that protocol procedures are critical tools to the achievement of your substantive ends, but they're not more important. That if you fail at the protocol, you jeopardize the achievement of your goals. Absolutely, no question about it. But something I failed to mention, the things that assure me that Trump's actions are, the messaging is horrible and weak and, everything you guys said. But the actions will not jeopardize the country. The things we do will not jeopardize the country, largely because his advisors, Pompeo and Bolton and Mattis, in his top-level positions, I have total confidence in every one of them to not let any action be taken that jeopardizes the security of the country.
John McCain, quoted from Arizona on his sickbed, says that Donald Trump is playing into Putin's hands. And a lot of people respect John McCain's opinion. Some people probably don't. I'm just throwing it out there. What I find fascinating is that you can be critical, Joe, all you want. And by the way, that was an eloquent criticism of Donald Trump. But it seems to only embolden his base. Those who love Donald Trump only love him more now since Monday.
Oh, yeah.
And that must just be incredible to someone like you who offered up that criticism as well as you did, and you have to then say, but people still love the guy.
Well, the polling and with the Republicans in terms of the president's performance in Helsinki has been positive. The polling that Putin has as a world leader amongst Republicans is rising. To me, it's just, you sit here and you wonder, I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I watched a Republican Party that were stalwarts in terms of their anti-Russian feelings, in terms of containing the Russians, in terms of their support for NATO, and that just seems to have been all washed away in the span of 2 years.
Tear down this wall.
And it's the wall that we have to worry about, in my opinion. The wall, it's not the southern border wall so much. It's the wall that the president's erecting between himself and his intelligence agencies. And I'm going to go back to what I said on this microphone when he was first elected. I thought his biggest weakness was not some of the substantive issues that he was going to bring to the fore, but the fact that he has only ever worked for himself and his father in his life. They've always been, him and his father have always been the decision makers.
He's never had a boss.
To the exclusion of everyone else in those companies. And he's trying to be the president in the same manner, and he's going to pay the price for that.
Mike?
One of the things about that the base recognizes about the intelligence services and the FBI, CIA, and so forth, is that there has been exposed corruption in certain elements, and there was a favoritism that has gotten very little play, but is absolutely true. The notice of the Russian meddling and all the things Secretary Warner described, came to the attention of those intelligence services in 2016, well before Election Day, and it made the President Obama aware of them, and they made the Clinton campaign aware of it because there was a lot of evidence that they were the target. And they, instead of warning, likewise, the Trump campaign, they surveilled them. They planted spies inside the campaign, or tried to. So that's the intelligence service that you want Donald Trump to swear absolute loyalty to.
Let's take a phone call. You're on with WRNR, the Berkeley and Jefferson County Medical Center WVU Medicine Talk Line. Nice to have you.
Good morning, Ken from Inwood. How y'all doing?
Good, Ken from Inwood. How are you?
Not too bad. Hey, I think another wall that's apparently going up that we're not paying for is the wall between our allies. That fought for us for 2 wars. Well, 3 when we had Korea, too. And another thing that really got me about that press conference is that he wanted to deliver American citizens, former ambassadors, to go talk to Putin about what he was mad about. I was dumbfounded.
Yeah, and that's the issue, I think, for the Department of State and the White House disagreed on, because when you had the press secretary at the White House come out and say that the president, I think it was sort of in the middle. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but the secretary, the State Department, saying absolutely not. That was one more thing. You mentioned the wall around the allies. Are you making reference on his wanting to get more money out of the NATO countries, Ken?
No, there's ways of getting money, and they've already been putting money into it. But slow as it is, that's fine, whatever. But it's the barriers. Oh God, what I'm looking at. Our relationships with them. Becoming harsher and harsher. Canada, Germany, France, Britain, of all. You don't disrespect the Prime Minister. At least you did it in front of her face. I could have got that. But it's and even to go protocol. You don't be late for the Queen. That's just you want to get a country mad at you. That's what you do. But it was just for Congress, and maybe you guys can help me on this one. I never seen Congress have 2 bills lately that are 98-0 in regards to their support of NATO, and that they will not deliver any American citizen to Russia.
Joe Ferretti, and Ken, you can stay on for a minute if you want. Joe Ferretti, in his comment, talked about growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where it was always the Republican Party was the stalwart defender against enemies such as Russia. And now, yesterday, you have in the House of Representatives, you have Democrats shouting USA. Now, let me lay this out.
They were out of practice.
The Democratic Party is a party that, in my mind, has been drifting to the left nationally. I'm not talking about here in Berkeley or Jefferson County, but I'm talking about nationally, drifting to the left in search of a message that might work in the midterms. Has Donald Trump handed them a message where the Democrats actually can campaign on issues such as being tougher on Russia than the Republicans? Because that would be a head-spinning turn if they could pull that off. Does that happen, Jason?
Well, I think it's possible. With this past week, if more of what happened this week continues, I think absolutely. And now you've seen the president come out and invite Putin to the White House, which is kind of a surprise to everyone. And I think that he's well aware that Putin made an ass out of Donald Trump this week, and Trump wants to make up for that. And I think he wants Putin to come to the White House, and I think he wants to speak very sternly. Yeah, I think he wants to be.
And he's coming in October. What kind of strategy is that? And before the election.
Yeah, imagine that. I think he wants to be the tough guy the next time, because it clearly looked like he got played by Vladimir Putin.
I have 3 words for the Democrats about considering national security as a prime campaign issue. Go for it.
Really? And why is that, Mike?
Because they don't have anybody credible that can love and secure the country than the image that Donald Trump projects to his base.
Ken, a word on that?
Well, per usual, I think the Democrats will mess up messaging. But
it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ken.
But saying that Donald Trump, here's where you would go. If you love America so much, Mr. President Trump, and you want all these companies to come back to America, why aren't your companies coming back to America? Practice what you preach, brother.
Ken, that'll be the last word on that. Thanks so much for calling, as always. We're going to take a short break. We will be back with you here on Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave, Jason, Mike, Joe, Matt, and yours truly. Stay with us.
Since 1877, Farmers and Mechanics insurance companies have proudly supported our local community. Farmers and Mechanics has the insurance products to meet your needs, including home, auto, farm, dwelling fire, business owners, and umbrella coverage. Please contact your local independent agency for a review of your insurance needs and ask for a policy from the company that knows you best. Farmers and Mechanics insurance companies, just off Edwin Miller Boulevard on Administrative Drive in Martinsburg. FMIWV.com.
The Wellness Center at Berkeley Medical Center introduces a healthy way of life. It's not just another diet, but a weight management program developed by the Wellness Center that includes metabolic testing, a simple 10-minute breathing test that determines how many calories your body actually needs, followed by working one-on-one with a health coach to develop a personalized mix of exercise and nutrition to tip the scales in your favor towards successful weight loss. A lifetime of good health awaits at the Wellness Center. For more info, call 304-264-1232.
If you want to experience moments of joy, excitement, and satisfaction, visit the Honda Summer Spectacular event, where well-qualified buyers can get 0.9% APR on the 2018 Honda Pilot, part of KBB.com's 2018 Best Overall Brand. You've just entered car buying bliss.
Miller Honda, south of Winchester, home of the lifetime powertrain warranty. www.mymillerhonda.com.
See dealer for financing details based on 2018 branded materials from Kelly Blue Book. Visit KBB.com for information.
Downtown Martinsburg is the place to be for the Fridays at 5 Summer Concert Series from June 1st through August 31st. Enjoy great music and fun with well-known musicians, bands, and Martinsburg artists that'll liven up your spirits at the town square. Concerts begin at 5 p.m. and usually last until 7. Enjoy great music while visiting Martinsburg's Farmers Market, housed on East King Street, where you're able to enjoy fresh fruits and veggies, chicken and pork, and a lot more. Pets are allowed in the square during the concerts, provided they're on a 6-foot leash or less. For the full concert Summer Series lineup, go to MainStreetMartinsburg.com.
Welcome back into Eastern Panhandle Talk with Rob and Dave. Matt in for Rob. Our final segment here today with the political panel, Jason Barrett, Mike Caryl, and Joe Ferretti. And so happy to have you along with, for what I think has been a fairly robust kind of discussion today. So here's the final question of the day that I have, and it goes back to the Monday press conference in a sense. That this was a bomb. This was a news bomb on Monday. And I was amazed by how rapidly everyone knew about it and everyone had an opinion about it. It was just sort of one of those organic news days. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in a news cycle that go ignored. And it didn't seem that anyone ignored this. And one of the things I found interesting, and I'm listening to satellite radio for most of this on my car so I can tune into MSNBC or Fox or CNN and listen to what you're watching on the TV station. And I wanted to go back and forth between the stations because I wanted to see what the liberals were saying on MSNBC and the conservatives were saying on Fox. Initially, MSNBC came out and just trashed the president. I mean, it was just awful. And Fox came out equally strong, sort of trying to figure it out. They weren't totally positive because they were like walking on eggshells, but you could tell that the people at Fox was thinking, oh my goodness, how do we cover this news? Because he just did bad. He just did something bad, and we don't want to trash our own Donald Trump. Later in the day, however, you had Shep Smith coming out and being critical, which is to be expected because he's sort of their moderate in the middle of the afternoon. But then when Neil Cavuto came out at 4 o'clock and was really negative, that was surprise number one. And then Brett Baer and Brett Hume both coming out and being negative. And I knew at that point in time something was going on that wasn't good for Donald Trump. How much does the news, or fake news if you will, but how much does the news media influence something like this, their coverage of it? Because I didn't need coverage to know that I was a little upset. How much does that play in?
Oh, a great deal. Do you think that President Trump is going to have that little gathering of press with some of his cabinet people around him the next day to clarify what he meant when he was talking in Helsinki? I think that pressure came to bear. Newt Gingrich was tweeting right away saying he's got to correct this now. So there was a wave of accord developing.
Lindsey Graham, I think, was the first one out saying, whoa.
Yeah, there was a wave of accord developing with the Republicans and those in the Trump camp, and he felt the pressure, and I think he had to respond. He's been responding all week about it, trying to get it right in terms of the messaging, and that has to do with the media coverage.
Jason, when a politician has to explain something for 3 days, that's usually not a good thing, is it?
If you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah, there's an old saying, right?
Yeah, and that's not good. But I think that it doesn't matter what MSNBC or CNN says about Donald Trump, because his following's not going to believe anything on either of those two stations.
That is a fact.
When Fox starts to be critical, and people like Neil Cavuto and others start to be critical of the president, that's when it's a real problem for him, because, largely some of his following are almost cult-like, and it doesn't matter what he says or does, they're with him. But when Fox starts, and I think Fox is probably part of that group, but when they start to say bad things and be critical, that should be alarming to him.
Mike, should the president care? Because he has this sort of aura about him that he, he's a bulldog. He takes on the press. It doesn't matter what they say. Should he care about any of this, or should he just continue being Donald Trump? Any modification?
Well, I think when MSNBC and CNN criticize him, that helps him, with his base. But when Fox comes down on him and starts to waffle on their wholehearted support, then he absolutely needs to care. I'm a long-term Fox watcher, and
I'm surprised.
Shep Smith could easily take Rachel Maddow's job.
Oh, I don't think he's quite that liberal.
Believe me, Cavuto is no in the tank Trump supporter either. It's
objective.
But you go through, you hit the sweet spot, I think, with the 5 and Brett Baer and Martha, but then it really goes bad. I mean, it gets out of control with Tucker Carlson and Hannity, and it gets so bad. I have the same buttons on my satellite, and I don't have MSNBC on there anymore, and I don't have CNN anymore. But it got so bad yesterday, just in the middle of the day, when these two guys you're talking about, Shep Smith and Cavuto were on, that I just put the 50s rock and roll thing on for the rest of my trip to Berkeley Springs.
I've said often on this program, and I know Matt's heard this a lot, that it is very common for me to have in the same day a conservative, a Republican, and a Democrat give me two different critiques of the show, and they're both exactly the opposite. In other words, a Republican telling me I wasn't Republican enough, or a Democrat telling me that I was, too Republican. So sometimes we only listen to what we want to hear, but it's not hard these days to make one side or the other angry at you.
I wish more people would do what you do. And I do this too sometimes. Tune in both stations. I mean, just let it come in and handle it and make your own mind up. Don't just go looking for affirmation of what you already believe.
Yeah, I will say this. I mean, the morning shows seem to be the worst. Anyway, that's going to basically wrap us up for the week and this political show. Jason Barrett, Mike Caryl, Joe Ferretti. Always nice that we can get together, at least here, safe, talk politics, I encourage all of you to do that a little bit more around your dinner table, wherever it might be, family gatherings with your friends. Don't start dropping friends because they're members of the other party. Matt, it was great being with you this week. Thank you for being such a great leader and a great partner and making it all look so darn easy. Rob Mario will be back on Monday morning, I think, unless he will be back. You guys all have a great weekend out there. The Glenn Beck Show is next.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by TheraWorks Relief.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez, the man who owns the duck boat that overturned and sank during